Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Melinda Zalma, Tanenbaum's Manager of Programs, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Tanenbaum's Religious Diversity Leadership Summit and today's session, Purposeful Conversations, Lessons from Tanenbaum Peacemakers for the Workplace. I begin with a land acknowledgement, an intentional naming of the space in which we live and work. Land acknowledgement is a step towards fully hearing and honoring Indigenous peoples' history and culture and repairing the damage done through colonization. If you're tuning in from New York City, where Tanenbaum's offices are, and where I live, we are on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape Nation. We pay respect to the elders past and present who care for this region. We acknowledge, like so many, we have the privilege of resources from ceded and unceded land and from the settler colonial system. We'll put a link in the chat so you can identify the Indigenous connection of where you are, noting that this relationship and the website is not only limited to the United States. We invite you to share where you're from, where you're joining us, and when you do put this in the chat, make sure to share from panelists and attendees. We're excited to welcome people from all over. For our Muslim attendees joining us today, we wish you a blessed Ramadan and upcoming Eid al-Fitr. May your fasting be meaningful and your celebrations be safe. We are grateful to today's sponsors. Thank you to our summit sponsor, the Walt Disney Company, which has been part of our membership program for over 5 years and is one of our corporate leaders. They have regularly sponsored this event, and we are grateful for their generosity, continued support, and partnership in religious diversity. Today's session is also brought to you by Merck. For over 130 years, Merck has been guided by the view that great medicine and vaccines can change the world. They are one of our corporate partners and have been part of our membership program at Tanenbaum for almost 10 years. Their commitment to diversity is seen company-wide, and we are grateful for their support today. Additionally, Tanenbaum's workplace team acknowledges the support and experience of the Peacebuilding team, Janie Dumbleton and Ellie Curry. Tanenbaum is a secular, non-sectarian nonprofit that promotes mutual respect with practical programs that bridge religious differences and dispel prejudice in the workplace, healthcare, schools, and areas of armed conflict. Our peacebuilding program supports grassroots, religiously motivated peacemakers in 28 countries around the world in conflict-ridden and post-conflict areas. Our education team works with K-12 educators to incorporate religious diversities in their classrooms and to create inclusive school communities with our curricula and trainings for teachers, parents, and students. Our healthcare program provides medical professionals with religio-culturally competent care to better understand how patients may include their religious beliefs in their decision-making. Our workplace team supports corporations, large nonprofits, and government agencies in addressing religious diversity, working to create truly inclusive workspaces. We bring to the fore in all these areas the fact that religion is a powerful force in people's lives. We are secular and non-sectarian. We do not represent any particular religion. We offer tools and trainings for those of all religious backgrounds and none to act towards one another, respecting the dignity of the other. And with that, I'll hand it over to our workplace program associate, Nina Bowe.
Thank you, Melinda. My name is Nina Bowe, and I'm a program associate on our workplace team, supported by my colleagues Leslie Funk and Cameron Smith. Today's summit session will focus on 3 learning goals: to discuss the power of purposeful conversations, to explore the work of Tanenbaum's Peacemakers, and to identify the relevance to workplaces and how we can act on these lessons to do the work ourselves. And so to begin with, we'd love to hear from you. We'll invite you to use a word cloud to answer a question, and we'll share that out to you live. Our question today is visible on the next slide here. Like, what do you call these conversations in the workplace? Do you have a word that you use for difficult conversations like purposeful or courageous, or is it something else? So on your phone or laptop, please join us and go to menti.com, menti.com, and enter the code you see here on the screen and drop it into the chat, 20308561. So share that word with us. What do you call these types of conversations? And we'll see together how this word cloud develops live. So, and if you have any questions too, please feel free to drop that into the chat. My colleagues are monitoring and can definitely help you out as they're able. All right, so I'm seeing some words coming up already. Okay, some movement. Got useful, crucial, difficult. Oh, true north. That's one I haven't heard before. Courageous, crucial. I do like alliteration. Crucial and courageous conversation. Difficult discussion. That's going to come up in a second. Awesome. These are great. All right, we'll give this one more minute for anyone else tuning in. Code and website up here. Awesome. Thank you, Arch Producer, for highlighting that. All right, so I'm sensing some alliteration. This is awesome. Great. Let's hop back to the slide deck and pivot into content. So we're framing this conversation from difficult to purposeful, not because these conversations can't be difficult, but we feel that purposeful conversations is the goal and it gets to the point. But what do we mean by purposeful? Definition says purposeful is having or showing determination, resolve to intentional. So why does this change in word choice matter? We think it matters because purposeful conversations can be more than aspirational. They can be intentional, actionable, and accessible. They give us a foundation from which to build. Now, this doesn't mean you have to change what you call them, but it does underscore that the intent behind these types of conversation really matters. We'll unpack this in a moment, but to help me frame this further, I'd like to introduce you to the community of global experts who are already doing this work, members of Tanenbaum's Peacemakers in Action Network. Tanenbaum Peacemakers are grassroots, religiously motivated peacemakers located currently in 28 different countries. As Melinda mentioned, many from conflict or post-conflict environments. Every 2 years, new peacemakers are nominated and added to the network, joining folks and supporting one another in their local peace-building efforts. As this network has grown, so has the global reach of their work. Similarly, the Workplace Program's corporate membership program has become increasingly global in scope. Our corporate members are frequently working in some of the same locations as our peacemakers. This year at Tanenbaum's annual Peace Made Possible Gala on June 3rd, we'll be honoring our most recent peacemakers, Fatima Al-Bahadli from Iraq and Yeni Gloribel Nolasco Quijada from El Salvador. As you can imagine, purposeful conversations are an inherent part of the work that these peacemakers do. This shows up in different ways across a variety of scenarios. Alimami Koroma from Sierra Leone established a network of religious actors and institutions to cooperatively and non-violently respond to active conflict. Nozizwe Madlala Rutledge from South Africa played a role in the writing of the South Africa Constitution that ensured a place for women in politics. And Sakena Yaqubi from Afghanistan developed innovative literacy programs using Quranic study to empower girls during the Taliban's reign. Now, in considering these examples of peacemakers doing the work to build a bigger table, you might wonder, how? Each of these efforts began with individual steps and purposeful conversation. Let's delve into the techniques our peacemakers use. Through Tanenbaum's case studies on the work of the peacemakers, we identified key characteristics that were common among these religiously motivated peace actors. We believe that these qualities are not only applicable in peace building, but also in different ways in the workplace. There's a lot listed here, but we're going to highlight 3 today. It's worth noting that these characteristics tie in action and skills, things we can learn to do and practice, specifically possessing and using emotional intelligence, recognizing humanity, and communicating across boundaries. So the first characteristic we'll highlight is emotional intelligence. You're likely already familiar with this in a variety of ways. Oxford defines it as the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotion, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Clearly, this plays out practically everywhere. For peacemakers, we've seen that people they work with or they themselves may want to achieve peace, but the impact of violence and trauma may make it a hard and gradual process. Navigating how this impacts interpersonal relationships makes possessing emotional intelligence absolutely necessary. In the workplace, our current situation of the pandemic and remote work also brings up situations where emotional intelligence is helpful. Stressors impact our ability to focus. Perhaps we struggle with work-life balances. Emotional intelligence enables us to communicate that awareness and even help navigate solutions. In support of this work and more, Tanenbaum has a resource called the Accommodation Mindset, which helps people consider how to approach religious diversity in the workplace from an empathetic and accommodating approach. We'll share this out in tomorrow's follow-up email. The second common peacemaker characteristic is a component of emotional intelligence, and one that Tanenbaum also identified among the peacemakers: recognizing humanity in the other. Peacemakers often find themselves in situations where people are othered or even considered enemies. Peacemakers are typically the ones inspired and motivated to reach across the boundaries because they recognize the humanity in the other. Their ability to do so enables them to work with people, even those who are their enemies. In the workplace, we encourage clients to consider when and how there may be potential for otherness. Consider this example. A company is creating a faith-based employee resource group, and there's already an existing Pride LGBTQIA+ group. It's important to understand that not everyone has had a positive experience with religion, faith, or belief. Being intentional about preventing harm and welcoming people of different identities can often create strong ties between communities where none was anticipated. Our workplace team has even seen strong rapport between Pride LGBTQIA+ ERGs, helping new interfaith ERGs navigate the experience of starting programming and developing a strong network. Tanenbaum's competencies for respectful communication provide an accessible way to think around engaging with the other. This too will be shared out. This next one may sound straightforward, but it bears repeating. It is the third characteristic identified among the peacemakers, and again, is a quality that is encompassed by emotional intelligence. Communicating across cultural and societal boundaries is important, but at times can be challenging to do so respectfully. Anthropologist Edward Hall said, "Culture is communication and communication is culture." I feel confident in assuming all of us on this call don't come from the same culture, and we likely don't have the same communication style. This applies broadly, both internationally and domestically in the United States. I'm originally from Seattle, and we have a locally known phenomenon called the Seattle freeze. When in public, don't make eye contact, don't talk to people, just keep walking. I was once at a bus stop and a man asked me for the time. After I replied, we chatted briefly, and he later said, "I just moved here from Brooklyn, and you're the first person to just talk to me. I miss that. Thank you." With our peacemakers, we see this characteristic through the example of Dr. Ephraim Isaac of Ethiopia. Being born to two cultures, a Yemenite Jewish father and Oromo Ethiopian mother, he can share an innate and unique understanding of cultures and communication styles. Dr. Isaac has used that unique understanding to engage in peace building between Ethiopia and Eritrea, as well as Ethiopia and Somalia. Closer to home, a workplace example of this characteristic can be seen in sensitive scheduling around holidays. For example, during the current Muslim holy month of Ramadan, many Muslims fast from sunup to sundown. So being at work around food or focusing around intensive projects could be challenging. But everyone is different. Consider respectfully asking your colleague how they would like to be accommodated during this time. This goes beyond the golden rule of treat others as you would like to be treated, but to what we call the platinum rule. Treat others as they wish to be treated. More information about Ramadan and other days of significance can be found in Tanenbaum's holiday fact sheets available on our website at our workplace resources page. Tanenbaum also identified common techniques peacemakers use in their work. Some of these don't translate smoothly to the workplace, but we wanted to share them for your own consideration. And of course, none of them are applicable in all situations. For today's purposes, we are highlighting one technique and its relevance to the workplace: interfaith mobilization as a tool in peace building. Effective and respectful interfaith mobilization can make difficult conversations more likely to happen by helping create a solid foundation for that work. It allows us to humanize rather than see each other as representative of something different and unknown. Number 1, exploration and education. It's easy to keep things surface level and simply coexist with differences, but it's another thing to dig deep into learning about one another. Having more knowledge and awareness only serves to enable deeper, more authentic conversations. 2, exchanges go both ways. A willingness to share and learn has to be mutual. If I want someone to listen and learn about what I believe and what is important to me, I need to show them respect to do the same, and ideally be genuinely interested in learning about them. Building a network. As the name Peacemakers in Action Network suggests, this is an important takeaway from our peacemakers. We can't do this alone. To be effective, we need a network. Holidays, celebrations, finding common ground. One reason that we highlight this is that it's one of the easiest potential access points to learning opportunities. Most everyone is familiar with holidays, which can easily be included on workplace calendars and can be a logical first step to learning. However, it's worth noting that some traditions may not celebrate holidays, and that would be an opportunity to explore different avenues to connect and build relationships. Building bridges across differences. In utilizing the 3 characteristics and pursuing the points laid out here, we'll be better equipped to build bridges across differences, mobilize across faith and belief, and be better enabled to have purposeful conversation. So on our next slide, you'll see that at the beginning of this section, we got a glimpse of what interfaith mobilization can look like through the work of 3 peacemakers. It can be developing a network across religious lines, such as Alamami did in Sierra Leone, creating a diverse and integrated oversight, like Nozizwe in South Africa, or educating, such as Sakina's efforts in Afghanistan. Now, you might be thinking, Nina, the workplace is totally different from these situations. And you're absolutely right. How this will look in the workplace is different, but we can borrow from the same technique and characteristics peacemakers have used. In the workplace, this can look like faith-based ERGs collaborating together, possibly under the umbrella of an interfaith ERG, multicultural allyship and intersectionality by exploring, respecting, and acknowledging the nuance of how religion, faith, and belief can and do interact with other identities. Sensitive scheduling, educating ourselves about other traditions and beliefs to better understand how we can respect and accommodate each other. And with that, enough of me talking. Let's learn directly from the source. Our first peacemaker lesson is actually 2 people. Imam Muhammad Ashafa and Pastor James Wuye are religious leaders from Kaduna, northern Nigeria. They work together to teach peaceful ways to resolve conflict, but they didn't start out as peacemakers. In 1992, violent conflict broke out in their region, predominantly between Christians and Muslims. Both Imam Ashafa and Pastor James were drawn into fighting via Muslim and Christian militias, and sadly both paid a heavy price. Imam Ashafa lost 2 brothers, and Pastor James lost his hand. Though they grew to be leaders in their respective communities, at first they both entertained ideas of revenge. Over the years, they slowly built mutual respect and decided to work together to bridge the divide between their communities. In 1995, they formed the Interfaith Mediation Center, a religious grassroots organization that has successfully mediated between Christians and Muslims throughout Nigeria. The organization boasts over 10,000 members, training individuals to become peace activists. We're going to share 2 different clips from the documentary, The Imam and the Pastor. Let's take a look.
Over the last 5 years, the work of the Interfaith Mediation Center has been expanding. Teams of pastors and imams journey to trouble spots to lead workshops and seminars.
Okay, let's say this is not a realistic one.
The rapport between Pastor James and Imam Ashafa is the foundation of their trust-building work with religious and community leaders.
I'm not going to have problem with people around me. He said, control your anger, which means anger leads to murder. And whoever you kill his brother is going to retaliate. And that leads to genocide, which we witness in our community today. So the concept of anger.
Traveling together as an interfaith team presents its own challenges.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
As a team, you can see the Christian member of the team are waiting in the bus and in the car, and the Muslim community have to go and say their prayer. And when we have to meet on Sunday, the Muslim will wait and the Christian will go to say their prayer, and then they come back, we continue. You can see mutual respect for one another, absolute trust, absolute unselfishness in action.
Briefly, I'd love to invite a couple of quick responses in the chat. Again, make sure your audience is panelists and attendees so everyone can see. What did you get from this? Is there a word that comes to mind, or how does this make you feel? For me, this was my first time seeing it when I started putting this session together. And the thing that stood out to me was that friendship, in addition to respect. There's definitely a lot of different things going on with their relationship. Empathy, I see. Absolutely. We'll be sure to share the link out tomorrow as well to the full documentary. It's really great. Trust also. Courage, absolute respect. I loved that at the end, yeah. With slight reframing, the peace building lessons that we saw in this clip are applicable within our workplaces. Additionally, another takeaway I had is the impact of Imam Ashafa and Pastor James's relationship. They model what our peacebuilding team and Peacemakers in Action call transformed relationships. And that centers the work that they do and their commitment to it, but it also models it to other people. They train people in conflict resolution. This is something that is accessible and applicable in workplace settings and empowers us to better understand how to respond to issues. Local application. Context is important. Maybe there's an issue around scheduling that comes up in 2 different departments. Depending on the context, there may or may not be a one-size-fits-all solution to both problems. Perhaps there's more background to the dynamics between people involved. Maybe there's the nuance of the actual issue itself. Our responses and our solutions need to be contextual. Intentionally diversify and include. Just as the imam and the pastor's relationship exemplifies their own diverse identities, so too does their staff. It strengthens their commitment to the work they do in serving diverse communities. Being able to reflect that with their team only lends deeper legitimacy to the mission. It shows that they're willing to do the work of inviting and including people, and they're willing to build a bigger table in order to do so. Communicating across boundaries. This clip absolutely illustrates the peacemaker characteristic. Imam Ashafa and Pastor James have a close friendship. They understand and learn about their differences, and they're able to communicate respectfully and effectively across them. Accommodation and respect. Accommodation is not a bad word. It's courtesy and respect. It's a practice that allows people to be their whole authentic selves, to be respected, and to also do the work that they themselves are committed to doing. Let's consider this next video.
I practice my faith vehemently, and he does too. And we are still coexisting and living together. Yes, Christianity and Islam can coexist side by side, and people will still go to the heaven they dream of. This is true.
Even though we differ in some theological issues, we will make the world a safer place. I'm a Muslim cleric, having thousands of people behind me, I never compromise the principle of Islam, but Islam says create a space for others. And with this as a living example, even though he's not a Muslim, I like him. I can give my life to protect his honor and dignity. This is what Islam taught me to do. And I live by their principles. And I will live for it and die for it.
I love him because I'm told to love my neighbor as myself. I live by that principle.
Similarly, I'd love to welcome any responses that come to mind. What's a word or a thought that comes to mind? What's a feeling you have from that one? I think for me, what stands out is authenticity, is that they're both coming from very different backgrounds and they feel like they can be their true selves and do the work they do. See mutual respect, absolutely. Similarly, lessons from this clip hold true to both within peacebuilding and in the workplace. In addition to their own inspirational merit, the quotes on the screen illustrate that we can show up as our whole, truthful, authentic selves, and that can be respected. Doing so purposefully and authentically can enable us to emulate the work that Pastor James and Imam Ashafa do by doing the work, making space and a bigger table, reflecting on who is there, exploring and highlighting shared values, what they have in common, what they can work together on, respecting differences, both in interpersonal interaction as well as professional collaboration, and in building relationships. It sounds simple, but it is long-term. The more that we can deepen relationships, we strengthen our foundation for purposeful discussions and purposeful action. And with that, I'd love to introduce you to our next peacemaker. The Reverend Jacqueline Fritz Marupati comes from Indonesia. Between 1999 and 2003, violent clashes between Muslims and Christians in Maluku, Indonesia, killed 10,000 people and displaced over 500,000. Jackie responded with peace campaigns and advocacy, both nationally and internationally. Because he was intentional about engaging all parties, at times he was labeled as an enemy by Christians, Muslims, even the Indonesian military and police. Despite death threats and even an arson attack that destroyed his home, Jackie persisted. Concerned by the lack of reconciliation efforts, he co-founded the Maluku Interfaith Institution for Humanitarian Action. They build interfaith groups that include a live-in program to spend time in each other's homes to build trust and work together. They've also developed a peace curriculum, interfaith peace sermon program, and a trauma healing program. They support community development and the local government's peace-building capacity. When violence flared in 2011, Jackie formed groups of youth peace provocateurs, whose social media and texting for peace campaigns were widely recognized for their success in both limiting the scope of conflicts and preventing them from spreading. Many of his models have been adapted for use in other parts of Indonesia. We'll watch two short clips highlighting Jackie's approach towards peace, and thanks to our colleagues on the peacebuilding team, we were very fortunate to have Jackie share responses to questions specifically for you all today. Let's take a look.
I mean, when we talk about peace, there is two perspectives of peace. It's a negative peace and a positive peace. Yeah. So from the perspective of negative peace, peace building plays a role in eliminating particular dispute or conflict violence. On the other side, in terms of positive peace, peace building can play its effort to stabilize social cohesion so the new dispute or conflict cannot escalate. So building bridges through dialogue, create a meeting place where people can meet and share their differences, approach people from different backgrounds and offer companion, extended hand and making friends, involved in art performance is all we can do in our daily life to create the atmosphere of peace.
So with this one, you may be familiar with these concepts. Positive peace and negative peace are common terms in peace studies and often used in other fields. But what does this mean in the workplace? it's worth considering whether our actions or responses are coming from a place of assuming a positive peace or a negative peace. For those who may not be as familiar, positive peace means the presence of something that contributes towards peace. Peace-building efforts, restoration of relationships, stabilizing cohesion to prevent escalation. Do we see the presence of efforts that reinforce the characteristics and technique that we talked about? Negative peace, on the other hand, is merely the absence of conflict, when peace-building plays a role in simply eliminating violence. Jackie ends this clip by sharing a variety of concrete ways how to contribute to an atmosphere of peace from a positive peace perspective. Building bridges through dialogue, sharing differences, extending a hand to each other across those differences.
It is a long-term collaborative process, since it aims to change attitude, behaviors, and also norms. In the circle of peace building process, we need first to understand the root cause of conflict. We go through many other phases, such as influencing others with confidence, supporting people with skills to resolve dispute without violence, mobilize people to pursue and foster peace, and many other strategy and process. I used to say that peace building is a multi-level and multi-stakeholders approach. So it takes time, it takes process.
So similarly before, I'd love to get kind of what is a word that comes to mind? What kind of thoughts do you have in your head after this clip? For me, I think I realized complex. It's not easy, and I know that's a very obvious statement to make, but hearing Jackie's experiences, knowing what he's gone through a little bit, and hearing all of that makes me realize this is a commitment as well. These efforts, as he mentioned, are a long-term collaborative process. They're multi-level and multi-stakeholder, involving many people and different environments. Comment I see in the chat is endurance. Absolutely, you need to endure. You need to build bridges of peace. That takes commitment and time. Absolutely. And also, even though it wasn't as explicit in some of the other clips, is the fact that change is a process. When we talk about things like developing and practicing skills like emotional intelligence, communication across differences, developing interfaith networks, this too will take time and effort of us doing the work. Changing attitudes and behaviors and norms, however, should not be seen as a threat to life as we know it. It's a necessity. We are all of us dynamic and changing. Growth is not static. To lean into purposeful conversations and the actions that come with them, we too must change, grow, and evolve. And so lastly, just to sum things up, we've also added a few complementary last-minute workplace takeaways that tie into what we've explored today towards meaningful, purposeful conversations. One-on-one conversations. These can help foster relationships, help educate and learn about others, and exercise emotional intelligence. Reaching out to colleagues who are new to you. Reaching out across differences can help build relationships and create that foundation to build on with purposeful conversations. Hosting collaborative or internal ERG discussions. Employee resource groups are a natural environment for hosting some of these purposeful conversations or preparing for them. An ERG could host a conflict resolution training, an interfaith panel, or an upcoming holiday lunch and learn. Move beyond your comfort zone. Though it wasn't explicitly mentioned in today's examples, it's definitely something that they've all gone through. Time and again, we've seen the importance of self-awareness and introspection. We all have blind spots when it comes to our level of awareness around certain traditions and belief, but being aware of those and challenging ourselves to do the work, to branch out and learn something new, will only make us better equipped to use that emotional intelligence and communicate across differences. Explore intersectionality, not just across religion, but also the intersection of race, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, ability, and more. I may have things in common with someone who identifies as the same faith tradition I do, but we might differ in our other ways. What does this mean? How does this play out in the workplace? These are all questions to consider. And lastly, to remember that like peace building, purposeful conversations and the foundations that lead to them take time and are a process. We have to do the work in order to build a bigger table. On behalf of all of us at Tanenbaum, I thank you for your time and attention, and we'd be happy to take some questions right now. And I'd love to invite Melinda to come back and join me.
Thank you, Nina. That was great. I am always inspired by the Peacemakers.
Absolutely.
Okay, do we have any
had
questions?
Yeah, I think we had some in the chat.
Okay,
one of the things I know that do you have one?
Yes. And would you consider DEI work, diversity, equity, inclusion work, to be a form of peace building? And what are some of the similarities between the two? That's a great question.
It is a great question. I think all of us definitely have the opportunity to have a similar charge. I know a lot of my interests tie into conflict and post-conflict zones, and prior to coming to New York City and working with Tanenbaum, I was in the Peace Corps, working in the Balkans, and so it's peacemaking and peace building is a topic near and dear to my heart. And I think the thing that really stood out to me with this presentation is that we don't have to be in a conflict zone or a post-conflict zone to have the opportunity to do the work, to build these relationships and to build peace. And conversely, just because we're not in necessarily a conflict zone does not mean that the situations and the circumstances in which we or colleagues or members of the community find themselves are not high stakes, because clearly what we've been seeing in even just the last few years is that there's a lot of high stakes situation going on. And so the opportunity to lean into that peace building call, that mandate, I think, to me, I consider it a mandate, is really a unique opportunity that DEI as a field, I think, absolutely gives a platform to and lends itself to that.
Absolutely. And then we had a question from Carl. Are peacemakers volunteers?
Ooh. In some of these situations, and our peace building team could definitely speak to this a little bit more, but a lot of them, there are a number who are clergy in their different faith and religious tradition and may or may not necessarily receive a salary for that. There are many people who are called to this because of their beliefs, even if it's not a job. Maybe some of the examples that have an actual center or institution at some point perhaps might be salaried there, but I would say it's safe to say that so many of these peacemakers are pursuing this work not necessarily in tandem with a salary, but because they are called to because of their own beliefs and inspiration.
And our former CEO, Joyce Dubinsky, put in the chat that whatever work they do is dedicated to peace building. And also we do have, as we award our peacemakers, they do get a prize to help fund the work that they do. And as Nina said, they all come from many different backgrounds. Appreciate having Joyce, who's really has done incredible work and really is quite responsible for our peacemaker opportunities, and thank her for all the work that she's done in this. I saw we had another question in the Q&A, and this is from Jenna. You talked a lot today about similarities and applications for peacemaking at work. Can you speak to the differences as well to think about when trying to address these topics in the workplace? I think the question is, are there things that are different? We've highlighted some of the similarities, and what are some of the differences between the work of the peace makers and our work in workplace?
Absolutely. And that's something that came up in conversations with our peace building team, was also the context and understanding how things definitely differ with some of the characteristics and techniques that you saw on the screen that we didn't mention. There are a number of those that, again, tie in uniquely to if someone, a peacemaker, is a clergy member, if they're a priest or an imam. You know, there are some things that might be more contextual in an actual religious community, say a church or a synagogue or a mosque. And also to understanding cultural contexts and differences. I used to live in Brazil at one point, and just because of Brazil's strong cultural and historical connection to the Roman Catholic Church, you know, many Catholic holidays were national holidays. That's one example. And so understanding that there may be a different kind of line or a very blurred line between like church and state or religion and civic life. So understanding kind of like when and where do any of these characteristics and techniques may not actually apply. But I think the key thing that I remember is that context always matters. So even one of the examples we gave today in your context might not actually work, and that's totally okay as well.
And we have a question from Zara. Hi, Zara. It's good to see you. So Zara asked if we have any practical hands-on workshops that teaches how to put peace building and conflict resolution skills into practice at work. Learning how to do it at work, the actual hands-on things, of which Tanenbaum is one of our expertise, is the hands-on practical applications.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really came up with us was that this kind of taking peacemaker lessons and applying that to the workplace, this is a first, but it was definitely something that all of us were very excited about, and clearly with some of these comments we're seeing there's definitely interest. So I'm hoping that this might evolve into something that might be creating more work for us. But we are planning to also kind of condense this presentation into a 1 or 2 page PDF that we will be sharing out by the end of the summit as well.
And just to point out, we do in our work in education, we actually use the styles of conflict resolution and how we interact with each other. So we do have some techniques that go across the board on the things that we do. And at Tanenbaum, we learn very well from each other. So yes, do plan on seeing some of these turned into some actual practical hands-on applications. And then we have a question from Mike. Can you comment on how these principles could be applied to our country's race relations challenges? Excellent question.
Excellent. Very, always timely. And I think that's where the elements of intersectionality really do come out. And also that these, let me back up. My brain goes multiple places at once. So it's like, oh, this is a great question. I have to focus. I think the key takeaways is that these, even though we are bringing these lessons highlighted from peacemakers who are religiously motivated to this work, there are clearly so many elements, and especially the ones we highlighted today, that could easily be utilized as the previous question mentioned, kind of like in DEI, in diversity, equity, and inclusion in general, across that. And then, but also one of the things we always really focus on with Tanenbaum is we have to bring these issues to the forefront. Like we've had, you know, things we were planning, programming we were looking at, and then pivoted when, you know, okay, we have to talk about race relations based on what just happened in different places. And we've actually developed additional programming around that. Last fall, we had webinars with Dr. Abhijan and Dr. Kyati Joshi around race and religion, and really exploring kind of like, where does this play out? How does this play out? What does this mean? But to go back directly to the question, I think, at least for sure, all of the ones that we highlighted today with the characteristics and technique could absolutely be utilized in discussions or in whatever kind of purposeful discussion you're having. I think that's the key assumption that I neglected to highlight at the beginning, is that these characteristics and techniques they're brought to you by peacemakers that are religiously inspired, but these purposeful conversations do not only have to involve religion or faith and belief, but this can be applied to whatever kind of difficult, purposeful, intentional conversation you're planning to have.
As with a lot of the work that we do at Tanenbaum, religion is the lens for which we use the tools, but the tools are used across the board in every interaction and for creating inclusive spaces in general, not just inclusive of religious beliefs. Okay, it looks like we have, oh, I just saw a question pop up. Okay, we have one, perfect, because we have time for one last question. And Lisa asked, have you found that often misunderstandings can be the impetus for conversations that then lead to opportunity for peacemaking, conflict resolution, and bridge building in the workplace? That's excellent. I love that question because it does point to that often it's when we use those opportunities for the opportunities, sorry, when we use the conflicts, we can use conflicts as an opportunity for moving apart from each other, or we can use them as opportunities to create greater understanding.
Absolutely. And that's, I would say it's definitely one of them. It's not the only one, but misunderstanding, as Melinda mentioned, conflict, but also there are definitely other ways. Like we've seen people really be intentional about, we want to advance these kinds of discussions and dig into that. We, as one of my professors always said, we know what we don't know. And so kind of leaning into let's remedy that, let's fix that. But of course, absolutely, misunderstandings, conflict, or intentionality, just for the sake of it, all of those can be factors into advancing these discussions. But with that, I will hand it over to Melinda, and thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you, Nina. What an incredible presentation. Thank you for all the work that went into this. And thank you to the entire Tanenbaum workplace team for putting this together, as well as the Peacebuilding team for their contribution in highlighting the work of the Peacemakers, whom as I said before, I'm continually inspired and moved by. And as I watched the video clip of Pastor James and Imam Ashafa, I was struck by what Imam said as the foundation of his interfaith work, which has an important lesson to teach as we interact with each other across differences. He says, I never compromise the principle of Islam, and Islam says, create a space for other. Creating a bigger table, furthering religious understanding and resolving conflict does not entail compromising what we believe. It entails creating space for others while holding on to what we believe. I hope you will take this with you into the workplace and in the everyday encounters with those who are different from you. As we have these wonderful questions, you may come up with more questions as we go on. And if you are listening to the recording and come up with questions and want to dive deeper into this conversation, we invite you to join our conversation on July 13th at 12 p.m. We will get a chance to deep dive into this, and we'll explore scenarios and applications of how today's content, strategies, and takeaways can play out in the workplace. And then our next summit session will be on Tuesday, May 18th, with our exciting panel discussion with insights for all, called Women in Faith and Belief in the Workplace. Our moderators will be Sandra Imate, the CEO of the Institute for Inclusion in Legal Profession. And our esteemed panelists include Fatima Diop, AVP Portfolio Analysis from Alliance Bernstein, Tina Forrester, the Director of Culture Engagement at GSK, Amrit Kaur Aikri, the Legal Director from the Sikh Coalition, and Vanessa Sheridan, National Transgender Workplace and Expert Consultant of Vanessa Sheridan and Associates. We acknowledge that this session next Tuesday will take place on the second day of the Jewish holiday Shavuot, which I myself will be observing. So if you're unable to attend next Tuesday, we invite you to register and you will receive the recording. I'm excited to watch it. Thank you once again for your participation, for your joining us, and for all who put work into having this be a success. And we hope to see you again soon.